I would like to welcome Dr. Carla Clements to the stage. Dr. Clements is a transpersonal counseling professor at Naropa University and was the independent rater for the MAPS Phase 2 MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD study. She has been a therapist for over 30 years, specializing in PTSD in women since 1973, before PTSD even was called PTSD, before it even had a name. So reactions to women's traumatic experience have been a lifetime fascination and study of hers. So even though the vets from Vietnam were the primary reasons that PTSD was included as a diagnosis in the DSM, traumatized people who have just as often been women as men have known for eons that PTSD is real. This is not related to a lack of courage, and its effects in our lives are too often debilitating. When she had the opportunity to participate in the MAPS research trials, it was one of those once-in-a-lifetime experiences that she took. She has so much gratitude for all of those who have done this work and have so courageously continued to seek true healing for our community and the world. We're very honored to have Dr. Clements here today, who will present on opening our hearts, MDMA, personality traits, and the future of psychotherapy. Please welcome Dr. Clements.
Maybe bring the lights up just a bit so that we can all see each other, if you don't mind. I don't have any beautiful slides today. And I'd like to be able to see you and also have you see each other. Oh my, look at that. Thank you. Thank you. That's a great start. Good afternoon. And thank you for that wonderful intro, Kelsey. I'm so happy to be here. I want to welcome all of you in this room right now. My goodness, the brilliance, the experience, the knowledge. I'm truly humbled, and I'm really excited to be among you, so thank you for that. Heartfelt gratitude. Now there's a feeling. I'm going to say it again. Heartfelt gratitude. From my teachers, from both the light and the shadows of my experience. All the people responsible for today's event, thank you. And all the human beings who courageously participated in the MDMA study, as well as those still suffering from PTSD out there in the world. My co-researcher, Matt Kempo, who's here. Daniel and Allison, Marcela Otelero, Will Vanderveer. My role was relatively small. I was simply the collector of data 4 or 5 times throughout the study. And I wish for my remarks today to be only in the service of good and not ever to increase harm in the world. I spent a lot of time in the last 5 weeks creating a PowerPoint presentation for you. Had all the little emojis and charts, pictures and stuff. And then, and I hope you'll forgive me for this alternative presentation, but that's not what I wanted to say. It's not what I wanted to talk about today. what I want to talk about is the celebration of psychedelic successes, one in particular, 2 days here before Valentine's Day. And I would just like to share with you more about what it was like to be with these amazing people in the study, to bear witness to their experiences and to their transformations. To start, I'd like to just give you a bit of context for my talk today. First, I'm a white woman with a ton of privilege. I want to acknowledge and recognize that. I'm much closer to the 75 or three-quarter mark in age than I am to the half-century mark. We'll leave it at that. And as I wrote in one of my earliest songs, I still tend to be a radical, lesbian, feminist, separatist therapist. Sometimes I worry about my karma. Now you know I worry about what goes around. I know it come back around to me, but I can't help it if revenge is so sweet. It's sweet to me. No, I can't help it if revenge is so sweet. And anyway, I kind of hope my daughter does grow up to be a radical, lesbian, feminist, separatist therapist. Thank you. I've dropped a lot of those labels, but we do have to acknowledge our process, don't we? Where we've come from. I guess I want to tell you that I don't usually, in fact, I never have before shared what I'm going to share with you today in this type of a forum. And so just want you to know that. Bear with me if you would. In 1969, I was an undergraduate at CSU when I took my first psychedelic. It was, as many other people have described, one of the most profound and memorable experiences of my life. It doesn't sound so epiphany today as it did then, but I learned that everything was alive and everything was connected. And that knowledge changed my life. It was just a couple of years later, when I was at graduate school, still at CSU, when I got what I call an experiential PhD in trauma. I was kidnapped from the campus, held hostage, and managed to escape with my life, but not much else, the very next day. It was also a memorable experience, if one with seriously alternative valence, and it profoundly derailed my life as I knew it. I survived. I moved through various stages of so-called recovery, but there was something very, very wrong with me. I knew it, but I couldn't describe it very well. There weren't a lot of words for it then. There wasn't a symptom cluster. And one time, I told one of my many therapists, the problem was, the only feelings I had were mad, bad, scared, and vacant. That, I knew, wasn't right. I just didn't know how to get back from where I'd been. That night, I learned that my sense of the world and myself could be completely shattered. And it was very, very hard to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Now, this was all before PTSD had a slick name and a listing in the DSM-3. It was before the first show aired on television about rape. It was about the same time as Patty Hearst's abduction. She endured a very public display of our incredible cultural ignorance about this particular thing, this PTSD. It was about the same time as so many of our vets were coming back from Vietnam, returning home with their very own cases of PTSD. But at that time, it was still called shell shock. It was believed to be caused by cowardice, and it was mostly reserved for men. Well, one of the things I could still do was go to school. And so I did get another PhD at CU, but not in clinical psych, because I really didn't want anybody to know how truly crazy I was. So instead, I went back in ed psych, where I learned about statistics and charts and assessment and other things that were a lot more controllable than human beings and their feelings. I also did get some very good therapy. Yay, Gestaltists, I know you're out there. So by the time it was the mid-'80s, I decided that I knew at least as much as therapists out there about PTSD, and I started a psychotherapy practice specializing in PTSD in women. Later, I began teaching that same material to other people about how to do it, and I still do that at Naropa. I'm still talking about the same essential things: trauma. This last 30 years, I've learned a lot of stuff about how to heal PTSD. The most important one is that it's about love. And this sounds easy, doesn't it? Another one of those, oh, that's not so profound epiphanies. But it's actually remarkably hard to love and let yourself be loved. As anyone in this audience probably knows who's ever tried to be in a relationship. So this is the person they chose to serve as the blinded independent rater for the Boulder study of the MDMA and PTSD. I was hiding, and I don't think they saw me, right? They chose chronic, treatment-resistant cases, moderate to severe PTSD. Those are people and subjects. And we've been working on this for the last 3 years. Matt and my job was to try to quantify what people were experiencing. And of course, the goal was to try to discover if PTSD could actually be assisted in healing with MDMA. So at baseline, the very first testing that Matt and I did, we gave about 7 or 8 different tests, one of which is called the CAPS, has 200 points on it. There are about 25 questions. They're all symptoms. This is after you've already talked about what happened, what was the trauma, and when, and all of the details about the experience itself. Then you go into a series of questions about the symptoms, and you try to quantify on numbers from 1 to 4. So for example, I'd say, have you ever had this symptom? And they'd say yes. I'd say, well, in the last month, did you have it? They'd say yes. Then our question was, well, how often did you have it? So they could say anything from once or twice a month, which is a 1, to every single day, which is a 4, okay? And then the next part of the question would be, okay, so you've had that symptom, how debilitating is it in your life? And again, 1 to 4. Oh, not too bad, it's okay, it's pretty mild, all the way up to, truly, I can't function for days because of that. We had about 30 subjects in the Boulder sample, but not all of those completed the study, not all of them even enrolled. And I'm basing my talk today on about 20 of those who completed 4 full testing sessions with me, and one of those was the 12-month after session. The last test I gave was just about 10 days ago, and so we're very new at being finished here. The study itself is essentially done, and the results are not yet publicly available, though I did read one article on the MAPS website that has some data being publicized now. Keep in mind as I talk, though, even though I may refer to some numbers or quantifiers, that they're all highly vulnerable to change at this point. Well, of those 20 subjects, about half had what we call complex cases of PTSD. That means as early developmental children, that they had a trauma that was pretty significant. In most cases, these were child abuse or sexual abuse for children. Some had a mentally ill parent. A couple had more addicted parents. And so these were children who at a young age had experienced some fairly significant trauma to their central nervous structure. The other half of our subject pool were more adult onset, domestic violence, 4 cases of that. War, we had 3. Kidnapping, 3. Suicide by people who were very close to the subjects, there's a couple of those, a couple of gun violence, and 1 car accident. What is notable about them is that every single one was an interpersonal violence. That is, there was another human being involved in the damage that was inflicted. So on this 200-point scale for this one test, our range was from 50 to about 125. So the mean score was about a 90. That's a moderate to severe case of post-trauma. What Matt and I discovered was that virtually none of them slept, or they were taking tons of medication to try to sleep. Many could not work, or they worked in strange, kind of odd jobs at strange times of the day and night. And virtually all of them were struggling with not having any relationships, or they were so delicate and fragile and on the edge that those relationships weren't much help or support to these folks. They were all disassociated. They were all in incredible pain. Many of them struggled with physical illnesses as well. And they were quite crazy, honestly. Their thoughts, behaviors, swinging from terror to vacancy and complete panic. They claimed a huge number of symptoms that are in groups that mental health professionals are very likely to call personality disorders. And you mostly probably know what a life sentence that is. That's one of the things in the DSM. It had its own axis called Axis 2, and they're thought to be non-curable, non-treatable, even with medication. Every single one of these people described excruciating, difficult, traumatic experiences, many of them multiple throughout their lives. So Matt and I got our numbers as best we could, torturing people by asking them a billion hard questions and then translating those to 1, 2, 3, and 4. After the experimental treatment, which was after 2 to 3 sessions, and by that I mean there were 2 therapists, a man and a woman, and the client, the subject, went to a safe space for a whole day. And they took the medicine, the MDMA, in the morning, in pill form, and then spent the whole day with these 2 therapists. It's kind of a nice set and setting treatment with some music, some internal processing, and then the therapists were available to talk with them relatively frequently throughout the day. So I want to say that none of them told me that this drug was a panacea. They didn't think they were done or fixed. They acknowledged it was a tremendous amount of hard work. I continue to see how much courage it takes. And they had some excellent therapy. But what I want you to know about this, about them, when I first saw them after the treatment, was basically I did not recognize them. They would be sitting in this space by my office where I would pick them up. And I thought, I wonder who that is. That person looks a little familiar. I'd be looking for my person, going, when are they going to get here? I want to get this testing done. And it was them. They had a new hairdo. Or maybe, is it the green in the hair? That could be it. Maybe their hair is a different color. Maybe it's that they're wearing clothes that show skin. All these things were going through my mind. Maybe it's because they're smiling. Some actually looked at me. They were alive in their faces and in their eyes. Their skin, this is my favorite way of saying it, their skin went from gray to multicolored. There was someone in there behind their eyes. They had presence. Their disassociation had lifted. They were more directed and focused. They had metacognitive skills. They had a witness who could talk about what they were experiencing. They could talk about their own learning to cope. And all of those were very, very new. There was so much less defeat. So in their reclamation project, where they were trying to reclaim a sense of who they really were, the person they fully are in themselves, in that reclamation process, they had come back in some really important way to themselves, their bodies, and their minds. Behavior, thinking, and personality traits. Importantly, they felt they could do it now. They could face their own lives, their own selves, and not just freak out about it. After the next treatment, they were down another third of symptoms. So if we started at, say, 90 in this last phase, they were down to about 60, still over the threshold that we consider PTSD, which is about 50. And now they're down a bit more, but there's still a huge range. So some people doing a little bit better than others. Some had a lot more to do than others. Those early complex traumas are very hard to shift. But what I noticed is that they hugged me. They even hugged Matt. Matt, will you stand up? Where are you? There you are. They even hugged Matt. And now, many of you don't know Matt, but he's a marshmallow. And there were so many women who didn't want him in the room the first time around, right? So here he is. They're even hugging Matt. I consider that pretty good. They began to have confidence in their world again and confidence in themselves. They had a right to be on the planet, and they believed that. There was a return of some sort of trust and a definite return to relationship with other in their worlds, with the world in their world, with who they were, in connecting and making contact with others. They had feelings, their hearts were soft, and what they talked about most were their relationships. At the 12-month after testing, they were engaged fully in lives. The core of their own humanity was so present and available. And as one has said so poignantly, quote, "My soul snapped back into place," unquote. 3 had had additional traumas through that year, significant ones, that might have derailed any of us. And yes, it had an effect, but it didn't take them back to the beginning. They're very much in a process of moving forward, continuing to grow. It's estimated, I think, pretty conservatively, that 1 in 15 Americans suffers from PTSD or will in their lives, with 1 in 10 women. So I think those are fairly conservative. I think it's probably a lot higher than that, especially when you look at the entire range or the continuum that many of us are struggling with things even today. And we're healing, we're getting there, but it's not always easy. Other things that I noticed about this year after group, the child was no longer driving the bus. This is very good when the kid stops driving the bus. Their parts were more separate and functional. One of the things that I noticed was that their functional selves were actually doing things. They were driving. They were going outside. One even went scuba diving, which I thought was pretty good. And one told me, "I just hang out now. I enjoy not being weird." Yeah. Their feelings were back, and so they felt things. They not only did things, but they felt things. And I asked, what? What do you feel now? Love, joy, compassion, excitement, affection, appreciation, and gratitude. The most common thing they said when I asked them, "Well, how was it for you? Tell me in your own words, what was it like?" You know what they said? "Fucking amazing." Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. They also said it was life-saving, life-changing. It was a rebirth. It's no question that they changed, and things in their lives had changed. One told me, I thought this was really, really precious. It's kind of hard to remember sometimes now why I had to go through this. I got married, I'm in school, I went on a scuba trip. I'm living now, I'm not just trying to live. That's the wonderful thing about PTSD. When it's gone, it's gone. You might still have triggers. You might still get weirded out. You might even act out, but it is basically gone. That is a really big piece for people who suffer. So, what are the conclusions here about the future of psychotherapy? Well, let's do this. Mine was about 25, 30 years, healing, trying to get some good therapy. Theirs is like 3 to 4 sessions, 8 hours apiece, a few months. I'll definitely take it. I will definitely take it. MDMA is not going to eliminate the need for love or relationship, but it helps the person receive the love, and that's a big deal. So from debilitating lives that they didn't even call a life, that they wished would end quickly, please, they became creative, in service, making a contribution to the world that only they can make. I want to just end with a little quote that I found. If I can find it. I've lost my page. Oh, there it is. Life is not measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the moments that take our breath away. I would add that that's both in the light and the shadow sides of experience, and that what we're doing is trying to find our way back to love again and again, back to relationship, back to each other. If you're moved by what happens here today, make a donation to Medicinal Mindfulness or MAPS or someone else doing this work so that we can keep doing it. Don't yet know what it all means, but it's got a wonderful beginning. I'm so humbled and proud to be part of it. So much gratitude to all of you, all those that you touch, all those that they touch, and so on, and so on, and so on. When you think about it, we're either all in this together or we're all in it alone. I know which direction I want to go. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey everybody, again, microphone's right over here. If you have questions, we're going to do about 10 minutes worth. And please, let's reserve this time for only questions. If you'd like to tell a story of your experience, probably email the speaker point your time for that. So, go ahead.
Question. How close are you to being able to administer this for compassionate use rather than as part of the study?
Great question. They're going to begin phase 3. I believe hopefully this summer they're going to hopefully have enough money through MAPS to begin phase 3. That's going to spread it out all over the United States to, I think it's 250 sites. I believe that MAPS thinks that after that one, it can be approved for all kinds of new uses, not just in a therapeutic sense, but that it will be available more widely.
How long will that process take?
They're hoping 2020. I don't know, but that's a great thing to put in your mind every morning. Say, let's manifest that. Thank you for the question.
Hi. First of all, congratulations on beautiful research and really awesome work on so many levels.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. And you spoke a lot to this qualitative sort of the qualitative qualities of what you found around people's experiences and the transformation, and it was so beautiful to hear and definitely aligned with my more informal studies on the topic. And I was curious if you could speak a little bit more to the quantitative findings that you had. I don't know if you're able to reveal them at this point, but some of the numbers that what you found in terms of measuring the impact.
You know, I would. I can share some things with you, reminding you that they're still washing the data that I gave them. That means that other people are looking at the films and they're revising, because I was doing it in real time, so they might have, changes that they make. And then there were 100 people in the phase 2 studies from across different sites on the globe. And so hour 30, and then there were 70 more. So the numbers are going to look really different when they get published. What I can tell you is that in terms of symptoms on the CAPS, for the 20 that I've looked at fairly closely, if that average was at 90 for the beginning, the average went down a third to the 60 for the right after experimental stuff. And that's just over the threshold that we have, which we call, PTSD is over 50, and if you have 49, you don't have it or something. Right? And so they went down to 60, again with a big range. So some people were at 3, and some people were still at 100. By the next one, it went down again to about 38, so maybe by a third again. And I think that might be pretty accurate. So we start at 90, come down to 60, then finish up at 30, so the range is still present. In terms of personality issues, which was what I was going to speak more about today, there were over 1,100 symptoms that people claimed in the initial testing around personality disorder type behaviors that they were struggling with and experiencing. And, by the end of it, I would say those were down to less than 400 or 500. So there is some huge change in the quantitative piece. In earlier studies that we do have the final numbers on, it was up to an 80% remission. Just let that sink in for a minute. That's bigger than aspirin. An 80% remission of symptoms. That's amazing. That's what a plant does, right? So I'm expecting to get numbers in that same range, but I don't have access to all the subjects, so who knows? Those will come out soon. There is one study, article that MAPS has put out so far. It's on the website. In fact, you can read it up on MAPS's website. That's the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, MAPS. And there's just so much good reading on there. The full protocol of treatments on there, and one study where they're showing, a significant line. Looks like it's about 80 down to 40, 40 down to 20, something like that. Thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Oh, I wanted to thank you for that. They started sleeping.
That's awesome.
They started sleeping. I mean, that alone will change your life, don't you know? And so working and sleeping, doing things, those are big, big changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, when I heard you said they couldn't sleep, I thought what torture that would be. So just changing that one thing is life-changing, as we all know. And
Yes.
I just want to say, hearing you share all this, both qualitative and quantitative, just I think for all of us helps us get excited about the future of what happens if we facilitate that at scale, and what kind of impact can that have on society. So thank you for planting that seed.
Oh my gosh, so true. What's your name?
Philippe.
Philippe, thank you for that. That's so true. We have a hugely traumatized populace out there, my friends. I know that you know this, and some of you are among them. Hugely traumatized. And this is America. We live in the good places, right? So when we think about that global scale, it is a really amazing thought. Okay, time for one more. Thank you.
Thank you
Philippe.
very much. God
really
bless.
appreciate it.
First of all, thank you so much for that great presentation.
Thank you.
What I was wondering about was, are the people that are excluded from utilizing MDMA as far as contraindications, either medically, psychologically, or with like psychotropic medications? What do you do with that?
It's huge. That's such a big question. In the protocol for this particular study, we were required that people went off every psychotropic medication they were on. Now, that alone would make many of us shake in the rafters for days, like, oh my God, I don't know if I can go without my sleep medication. I don't know if I can live without my antidepressant. So that was a huge piece of the courage. It interrupted these people's ability to live, to work, to function, because they couldn't be on the medications that were giving them at least that much of a little shelf to stand on, right? So we had to screen that out. They had a 3-month period of being off medication in order to be a subject.
Was that in order to get accurate research information?
Yes.
Or was that because of physiological concerns?
That was totally research-based. To try so that we didn't have compounded results, but that person's on 7 medications, so what's that? How do you get just the MDMA effect?
Are there physical restrictions for this?
In the end, there were. We were trying to include cases of PTSD that were chronic and treatment resistant. We wanted to try to exclude cases of personality disorder, whatever that is. And, that in itself is such a conundrum. I want to talk about that some other time. But we were what I tried to do in the end was say, does this person have the ego strength to survive the protocol? Because it's tough. This is not an easy study to be in, right? So do they have the ego strength to survive it? Can they possibly benefit from it? Do they have what we call PTSD? And does it seem like that PTSD is the more important problem right now? That if we were to make some inroads with that other things would fall away. A lot of that, I'm sorry to tell you, is pretty subjective at this point. We need better tools. But I used a lot of the 30 years of experience and my own personal experience to say, yeah, I think this person can do it. And then there were people where I said, I fear for this person's well-being. Don't think we should do this to them. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so we've come to the end of our time together. Send that love out. It's a powerful drug. See you soon.